Sonic Frontiers is a game that I think the series has needed for a long while, and it brings a new hope for innovation, ambition, creativity, and focus that's been absent for many years. As I'm sure you've heard, however, it's not perfect, and trust me, I do have plenty of my own gripes with it, but it's still a game I would highly recommend, and I'm gonna try to get into why. This is intended to be a spoiler-free video. I'm not gonna discuss plot details outside of the main premise and how it informs the core gameplay loop. I'll also only be showing the first 2 islands and only the first major boss, as I think discovering a lot of this game's plot, locations, and even the very nature of certain encounters lends to a lot of the fun, and I wouldn't want to rob anybody of that. With all of that said, let's get started. After discovering the Chaos Emeralds have been drawn to the mysterious Starfall Islands, Sonic and his buddies decide to check it out, but upon their arrival, they're separated and his friends are stuck in some sort of dimensional flux. These islands are guarded by several enormous and powerful titans, and an AI program created by Eggman known as Sage is trying to use them against the Hedgehog, while she herself tries to search for a way to rescue the Doctor from the cyberspace dimension surrounding this strange location. The main gameplay loop centers around Sonic needing to rescue his friends. There will be one of his little buddies on each of these islands, and he has to find these little memory tokens to help wake them up and maybe eventually get them out of this strange cyberspace flux where they can't even interact with the physical world. They seem trapped between 2 different spaces, one digital and one real. As an interconnected and somewhat secondary objective, Sonic also needs to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds on each of these islands and fight that island's Titan, as a strange voice speaking to Sonic promises that by destroying the Titans, he can free his friends. This is where we're introduced to the main new core mechanic to Sonic Frontiers, this being the open zones. It's probably worth noting that this game was never marketed as open world. I think people just kind of got that idea and they sort of ran with it, and word of mouth sort of spread what game this was really going to be. The developers have only ever referred to this as an open zone format, and I think it's an actually kind of important distinction, and I think it works better for Sonic versus an open world mentality. The open zones are the Starfall Islands themselves. You have one large but still sectioned off area that's basically just a jungle gym. You have to go find your memory tokens, Chaos Emeralds, but then in order to get those, a lot of the times you need to get gears to get keys. It's a lot of just running around, doing platforming challenges, and obtaining gubbins. There's an interesting mix here where it's like the main gameplay itself is pretty simple in its setup, but they add a lot of mechanics into it, or at least a lot of objectives that kind of interconnect with each other that help make it engaging and help keep it fun. I've said it a few times before in my videos, one of the quintessential things you have got to get down in your video game, especially one that's taking place in like larger spaces, if it's a platformer, that sort of thing, you have to make the process of getting from point A to point B fun. And if you get that down, then you're in pretty good standing. And this game is like a testament to just getting from point A to point B, and it's a blast pretty much the entire time. I really love just moving around in this game. Sonic feels great. And it's cool because it's one of the first times I've seen them give you the ability to like go into the settings and you can change like how he turns, how he handles, his starting speed, boost speed, everything like that. It gives you some freedom on how to actually maneuver around and control how Sonic handles when you're just exploring these islands. Dude, this feels like Sonic Adventure 1, but like expanded to such a much larger scale. It's like they took elements from, you know, the platforming and everything from the actual stages in that game, mixed it with the adventure fields, and just they integrated them into one thing, and it works. It really works. It's not perfect. I think one of my biggest gripes is that, yeah, you do have a bunch of like rails, bounce pads, like surfaces to like jump around on and stuff like that. These tiny little snippets of challenges that you would normally see interspersed throughout levels, but instead of being interconnected, they're just scattered all across these open zones, and you have to just go find which ones you feel like tackling. You could be running around just going towards a completely different objective, and you'll just find a bunch of these that may even be pointed on your way to where you're going. You get that kinetic feeling of just having to get past these obstacles, but you get these memory tokens or something else for it. The thing about it is, I don't mind that there's a bunch of like floating rails and springs and everything scattered all around the world. I don't mind that necessarily. That's kind of how Sonic's always done things. It's just always felt a little more focused focused, and I think one of the things that hurts it is that thematically, these are just assets that are scattered throughout every world, and they all look the same from beginning to end. I wish that sometimes the actual structure or the look of the island itself informed how these obstacle courses looked a lot of the time too. I wish that there were more instances where the actual like geography of the environment was molded around, you know, spinning in loops and stuff like that, versus just kind of like taking a bunch of like interactable assets and without even changing the textures to make them match what's around them, they're just sort of slapped all over the place. I like them in terms of gameplay, I just, visually, it is lacking something. Now, I do disagree with some people that are saying like the art style doesn't really work for Sonic or doesn't look very Sonic related to me. Again, I'm gonna bring up Sonic Adventure more than once, but that game was also just kind of going for realism in a lot of its environments, or at least as close as they could get to it for the time period, and just kind of like putting Sonic characters in it. So, I mean, this just kind of feels like an evolution of that. I just wish that there was a little bit more thought put into the structure. It especially pains me because there are a couple of moments, and I was super thrilled to see this, but there are times when you could be exploring one island or another, and you could find like this little hidden place, and there's just these underground temples and ruins and stuff to explore. If you know anything about me, you know that I was losing my mind as soon as I saw that. That is all I want. Temples and ruins are so good for Sonic. Like, he just fits into that environment so incredibly well. And I just can't get enough of that aesthetic. And I wish there was more of that here, but there were times when, you know, you're in there and everything just kind of feels like it's flowing together, and it feels like the structures and the obstacles are a bit more, you know, deliberate, or like it actually just kind of fits in to that world and to the history around it, that sort of thing. One of the other issues I have is that when you're out in the open zone, sometimes you'll find a cluster of these little like obstacle courses, and they don't always lead into each other. You'll run through one, and as soon as you hop off of it, you basically have to turn yourself around and go back to the beginning to like take a different path to go on the other one. It just doesn't feel as natural and as smooth as maybe I think it could have, where I think that they took the openness of those zones a little too literally, and they don't allow things to lead into each other, maybe because they were afraid of things feeling linear, but that linearity, at least to a controlled sense, would have lended a bit better to these islands feeling a little more intelligently designed. With all of that said, because of how good it feels, a lot of those issues kind of feel negligible, not invisible, but I don't mind them as much from the moment-to-moment gameplay because I'm just, you know, having a good time. Like, after I finished the game, I have a hard time just putting this game down. I just keep getting back onto it because I just want to run around more. I want to keep, like, completing all of the maps. You'll find these little puzzles by these goalposts. I don't like that some of them are locked to certain times of the day. That's kind of stupid, especially since you can't fast forward time and you just have to sit there and wait. It takes forever to get to nighttime to do some of these, and that just feels useless. But by completing these small puzzles, which are usually just like a momentary bit of fun that just kind of help break things up a little bit, you can unlock a certain part of the map, and then that will show you, like, you know, where new cyberspace gates are, where new collectibles are, that sort of thing, or where to speak to your buddies along the way. I actually found myself having a really good time just filling out the map. Like, it was just a fun little objective in and of itself to just see what there was to see in these environments and stuff like that. And one of the things that you do get to see is something I really enjoyed in this game, and that was the combat. I do want to see this fleshed out more in the future, but I do think that this was a good step in the right direction. I notice a lot of people that say, you know, you get the same results with every type of attack against every kind of enemy. Technically, that's true. You can beat most enemies with all of the same attacks, you know, pretty much all of the time. But I did notice that some attacks just straight up take enemies down faster. There's not one attack that just takes these guys out, but there's a little bit of a fun element of finding, you know, which ones take which guys down faster, and I found that part at least a bit more engaging than I feel like people are really giving it credit for. That said, the button placement, or like how they mapped out these actions, feels a little awkward sometimes. I've had a couple of moments where I just had a tough time like actually remembering which buttons equaled which attacks, and I feel like because Sonic has to do so much acrobatically when he's just running around and everything like that, they didn't really leave themselves open to a lot of options when it came out to mapping a Bayonetta-style, like, combat mechanic. Now, one of the more fun elements that they kind of bring to the table when it comes to the combat is these guardians that are just kind of like sauntering around the environments, and it's really funny sometimes when you're just running around minding your own business, and they just zone in on you, and they go to war. Some of these guys are more fun than others. This one guy in particular, this tower, I think it was, no, it wasn't the tower, whatever. He's got like these rails around him, and as he starts throwing more at you, and you're just like going in circles in these rails, and he's firing things at you from more than one direction, that's fine and all. I like that, but I would also like to see where I'm going, but his legs keep obstructing the camera. It's such a stupid design. Like, I get the legs have to be there, but maybe they can become transparent when they're obstructing your view. You know, other games do that. That wouldn't have been too difficult to figure out. And yeah, some are just kind of time consuming. The shark is fun, but you really want to come to this guy once you've got the right moves, or at least the right, like, power, that sort of thing. Otherwise, you're gonna be spending way more time on this than necessary, because I think it's sort of dragging you around until it sort of randomly encounters a space that is dictated as a good enough place to fight it. Those ones are weird. But for the most part, they are a welcome challenge, and it's especially satisfying when you can go back to them later, especially once you figure out the parry mechanic or the dodge system. As you start getting better at using different combos or different attack patterns, you know, that sort of thing, you start to get better at these fights. They start going down quicker, or after, again, you've powered yourself up. It's just more fun seeing, you know, people that gave you trouble beforehand just dropping like flies. And yeah, that's a mechanic too. You actually do have an RPG element in here where you can power Sonic up, which is really interesting. I never really saw that one coming. But across the open zones, you're gonna find these little guys called Coco, which are, man, even the name, it's such a transparent, you know, they wanted to bank on the Koroks from Breath of the Wild, but they had to call them something different. It was, you know, you can copy my homework, but don't make it too obvious, that sort of thing. But yeah, they are cute, and they do have a deeper purpose in the game later on. But mechanically, as you find more of these guys, you can go over to this Elder Coco, and he can boost up your speed, how many rings that you can hold at one time. The stupid thing about him, though, is that he only does like one level of that stat at a time, and the animation is not that quick, and it feels like it takes way too long to level yourself up. If you've gotten just like a crap load of cocoa, you're gonna be sitting there for a half hour just doing this stupid menu to actually raise up your level. It really should have just been like a drop-down menu so you could choose how many levels you wanted to upgrade in accordance to how many cocoa that you were presenting him with. Boosting how many rings you can carry at once might seem kind of useless at first, because if you get 400 rings, which is what you start with as your maximum, then you enter this like super speed. It's like your max boost where you're just constantly trucking along. So it might sound backwards if you're trying to upgrade your ring count, and you know, it's gonna take you longer to reach that state. But if you max out your speed, then you're just basically always at that boosted level, and you never have to worry about actually obtaining a certain amount of rings to reach that state. So, you know, that's kind of fun. I think boosting your rings was more supposed to be like a defensive measure, because you don't lose all of your rings when you get hit, not when you can carry that many. You do lose a good chunk, but it does add to how many hits you can actually take before, you know, you run out of rings entirely. And, you know, when you turn into Super Sonic, every second counts as a ring going down, and so it gives you more time in your super form that you don't have to worry about, you know, how many hits you're taking or how long it's taking you to get through that fight, although we'll get to that whole thing later. Collecting the Cocoa is just fine. I just wish actually like getting the Elder Cocoa to upgrade these for you didn't have to be this tedious. They can easily fix this in a patch. I really, really hope they do. You also have the Hermit Cocoa, and for him, around the environment, you can find these power and defense seeds. You can get them from certain enemies, you can get them out of crates. There's a couple of different ways that you can obtain these. You can bring them to him, and he will just boost your power and defense, but because those levels have their own MacGuffins, you don't have to choose which of them he's upgrading. You just present however many you have, and then he will boost you to the maximum possible level that you have for that stat just based on what you bring him. And it's so weird having that contrast between the Elder Cocoa and the Hermit Cocoa, where one is so fast and seamless and the other one wants to make me pull my hair out. outside of actually going out and finding these things in the environment, you can actually go to these cyberspace gates where you can enter a fishing pond and Big will let you fish at his lake. You have to get a bunch of tokens out in the open world. There is also this really annoying like slot machine mini game where there's like, it's essentially they combined like the blood moon and the starfall pieces from Breath of the Wild into one mechanic where just a bunch of I don't know, this mechanic was weird and stupid and I don't understand it, but you can net a whole lot of fishing tokens out of it. You can go to these fishing holes and just fish for a while. The mechanic is incredibly simple, it's super relaxing, the music is nice, and this can basically break the game. I think that maybe the fishing game is a little overpowered. Granted, you do have to spend a long time in the fishing hole, especially towards the beginning if you actually want to take advantage of it to that degree, but you can collect pretty much everything here. You can collect gears, you can collect keys for the Chaos Emeralds, you can collect cocoa and power and defense seeds. You can rack up an obscene amount of collectibles in this fishing hole, and you can pretty much, if you have enough tokens, just go in here and ignore pretty much everything else in the game, hop out, go upgrade your stats, go get your Chaos Emeralds, and pretend the rest of the open zones don't exist. It's a little weird. I do enjoy the fishing minigame, and I like seeing Big having a positive role, in another Sonic game, but maybe they should have toned down how useful this could be. Another thing you can collect here, though, are these Eggman memos. Now, I do highly recommend collecting these, but I would stock up on them and then don't actually sit down and listen to them until you're closer to the end of the game. They are actually pretty solid and they pull from a lot of lore. In fact, this entire game does that a lot. Maybe they bring up references to past games a little bit too much, but I was also just so happy to see one of these games acknowledge that there is a continuity and they treated it with some level of importance. They treated like past characters and events with a certain level of gravity, and oh man, the characters in this game, they are characters. That's a big deal for this franchise, or at least it has been for a while. They haven't really felt like people for a hot minute, and so for, having Ian Flynn come in here and help out with the dialogue and everything like that, to have them interact on such a level like this, they actually have some depth to them. It feels like the characters have grown, and in fact, a lot of these conversations make me wonder, what are the roles of these characters going to be in future titles? Are they going to be around less? I don't know. It has implications, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it's some of the best writing that I've seen for these characters in years, man. The plot itself, I think, is good. It's not incredible, and I do think it kind of peters off a little bit towards the end, mostly because it builds up this really big thing. And again, I don't want to say too much, but I wasn't really satisfied with where things left off by the game's conclusion in terms of story, but there were some revelations that I was really, really interested to know about. They leave some things vague enough, but they give you a little bit more background on elements that have been around since game 1. It's actually really, really fascinating. And again, for any Sonic Adventure 1 fans out there, there are some really fun little nuggets of lore in here that I was really excited to see. What really caught me off guard was that I cared about Eggman in this game, and man, just Mike Pollock brought it to the table. This is my favorite performance for him in this series. He's got a lot of what I liked about Dean Bristow, but he still brings what makes his Eggman to the table. It feels like his version of the character, but it feels like there's a side of him that I've been missing for a while instead of him just being a bumbling doofus. Man, even the Coco surprised me. They have an unexpected level of depth in this game to the degree that it almost reminded me of Kena Bridge of Spirits. I can't say anything more than that. But man, I was surprised by how much I ended up liking the Coco, because I kind of thought they were just Korok ripoffs before I actually played the game. The weakest part of the game is the cyberspace levels. I share a common problem with these, as a lot of people do, with all of them created using the old and tired themes of Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant, Sky Sanctuary, and a new highway theme. I like Green Hill Zone, but this is egregious, and it only gets worse when you realize most of these levels are just recreations of level structures from older Sonic games. there is next to nothing original about them aside from the terrible way they handle. Part of the trial that comes from the cyberspace stages is that Sonic's physics just feel unwieldy at times, inconsistent. I swear there are some stages where he just handles in a completely different way than he does in others, and it's infuriating. The bright side is that they are optional, but it really doesn't excuse how cheap they feel. These are one of the fastest ways that you can obtain keys to actually unlock the Chaos Emeralds in the open zones, but it's still like, man, these could have been better. A number of them can be pretty fun to learn how to perfect and speedrun, but the highlight of them for me was level 1, 2, and none of the others quite hit the same level for me. The music sure was great though. I mean, speaking of music, this is a solid soundtrack. I like the EDM stuff in the cyberspace levels well enough, more than the ones from Forces anyway, so there's an improvement there. But even the more laid-back, atmospheric pieces of the overworld are really pleasant, and I ended up liking a lot of them, but nothing tops what happens during the boss battles. I've mentioned it a few times already, but one of your main objectives is to collect keys so that you can get Chaos Emeralds. You can get gears to go through cyberspace, or you can just go fishing for a lot. Either way, you have to go get these pretty little gems so that you can have even a chance at taking out the Titan Guardians of that island. These guys will turn you inside out as normal Sonic, but once you're powered up as Super Sonic and throw down with them, man, this stuff is just so much fun. I do wish they were maybe harder, a little longer, something like that. It doesn't take a lot of skill or attention to go into these fights and win, but the absolute spectacle mixed with the hilariously great music just makes for an experience I haven't gotten from a Sonic game in a really, really long time. The fact that some of these fights actually kind of reminded me of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance in some kind of way speaks volumes. Man, the music. They really didn't have to go as hard for these tracks as they did, but they're honestly so good, even independent from the game itself. That does sort of lead me to one of my bigger complaints about the game though, but I can't talk about it too much as it has to do with how everything wraps up towards the end. These encounters, the plot details discovered throughout the game, and the overall tone lingering over just about everything does a lot to build up what you should be fighting as the huge finale, and I do think that that was the original intent, but man, you can really feel how hard the devs ran out of money by the end. I like the last island a lot. It might be my favorite in the game, but man, the story and final encounters just don't match what was established beforehand. Don't hate them, they're just underwhelming in comparison, but that's all I can say for now. Despite the complaints I have, I kind of love this game. I've said it a few times already, but this feels like the spirit of Sonic Adventure 1 brought to new life in a larger, more expansive game, and while I think a lot of elements need to be tightened and polished for future titles, this was a really good time, and I just keep wanting to go back. I still really need to platinum this game. If you're looking for the best version to play, I really loved playing this on the PS5, and I intend to get a copy for the PC as well to take advantage of the already great modding scene with all the mods addressing physics in the cyberspace levels, as well as some cosmetic mods, but while the Switch version looks noticeably worse and doesn't target the 60 FPS as the PS5 version, it does still run well, and it wasn't a bad way to play the game at all. I do also have some sort of obligation to mention the graphical pop-in. It's worse in the Switch version, but it's still present in the others. It's not the sort of thing that really bothers me personally, but it is still a present flaw, and one that I don't blame anyone for being bugged or distracted by. This feels like an enormous step in the right direction for Sonic Team. I really hope we get to see more stuff like this in the near future. Hell, I'd pay to see some DLC for this game. New missions, playable characters, maybe fix the Metal Gear Solid 5 job that was done to the game's finale. If Sonic 3 and Knuckles could retroactively add to an experience crunched for time and make something great out of it, I don't see why the same can't be done here. Okay, well hey, some last minute news just dropped the day before this video was supposed to go live. Apparently, Sega is releasing a bunch of DLC for this game next year, and it's all gonna be free, and some of it is gonna be new playable characters, and even new story campaign stuff, on top of new challenges and cosmetics and stuff like that. I thought it was just gonna be costumes, like with the Monster Hunter DLC that came out recently. Like, you get the Rathalos like outfit and you can cook meat at the fishing spots. When they said there was gonna be DLC, I thought it was gonna be more of that, and I was hopeful that it was gonna like really expand on the game, but I just wasn't ready for that announcement so clear out of the blue. I'm especially hopeful for the new story stuff because, man, if they help do stuff with the ending of this game or they kind of like add more to that, then that addresses one of my biggest issues with the experience. And it's all gonna be free. That's awesome. Would it be nice if it was part of the initial package? Yes, but honestly, I will take this. All right, back to the video from before I had to jump in and record this last minute. But as for now, yes, I do recommend Sonic Frontiers. Please play it. If you have to wait for a price drop, go for it. But I really do recommend this game, and I'm really excited to see what might be in store for the future of this franchise. And the fact that I can say that after playing this makes me so happy. I do wish I could have gotten this out on a more timely manner when everything was just a little bit more relevant, but you know, that's how it goes. It's a really busy time of the year, especially for retail, and that's where a lot of my time and energy has been going lately. I want to work on videos more. This Digimon World 2 video is going to be taking a lot out of me, but I am excited about getting it done. It's just, that's just kind of where I gotta be for now. But I am getting closer and closer to being able to make this my one job. And of course, I have my Patreon supporters to thank for that in a huge way. And of course, I really want to shout out my top tier patrons for this month. They are Brendan Hess, Christine Larkin, Earl Valco, Jeremiah Harrison, Joshua Davis, Lederick, Mackenzel, Mr. SP, Wonton Photo, NBTV, Nickel Plated, Patricia Marcoux, Cinderin7, and Cirrus the Skeptic. Thank you all so much, each and every one of you. You make this possible, and you make this worth it. We're gonna keep this channel going. I want to see if I can get one little more video out this year. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but I really want to if it works out. Otherwise, Batman and Digimon are just kind of the big things on the brain right now, but Digimon might have to take priority because the last Batman video didn't really do that well. Until then, I got a lot of work to do. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next mission.